Hello, good day, ladies and gentlemen, and whatever time of the day it is for you. Welcome from GHI, from myself, Max, and everyone on the GHI team. We hope you're keeping safe and well, and thanks for being with us for the latest of our webinar series. Today, we're looking at the topic of sustainability in aviation, and interested to get your questions and thoughts and those of our panelists that I'll introduce shortly. We hope the business continues to improve for you all and that the virus is rescinding wherever you are logging in from across the world, and our best wishes to all of you. I'd like to start by saying a big thank you to today's sponsor, which is Vestergaard, to Lars and the team for getting behind the conference. There we go. Finally. So thank you to Lars and the team. We appreciate your support. Some housekeeping announcements. If you are a new viewer of today's session, you haven't been to our previous webinars, just a couple of things to fill you in on. All of the presentations, we will endeavour to send those out to you post-session as soon as we can. Questions, as I mentioned at the start, are very much welcome today, and you can submit those. There's a little Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen on a black bar. It is the one with two speech bubbles. It says Q&A next to it. If you click that and submit your questions, I will pick those up and I will ask them to our panellists after they conclude the presentations a little later on. There is a couple down the line, a little button that says chat with a single quote bubble mark. If you want to chat with any of your peers today, then please do it in that area there, but make sure you pop your questions in the Q&A, and any chat that you want to have, just pop it into the chat icon. Talking of questions, we will have a couple of our own poll questions for you a little later on, so when I load those up, please vote on your preferred option, and we'll be doing some live polling and reporting the results in. I'd be interested to see what your opinions are on some of the sustainability topics. The running order for today, we're going to have 4 mini presentations of around 10 minutes each, and then we will move it into an open floor discussion with you guys getting to your questions. So ask your questions as the presentations roll along, but we won't be asking them to our panelists until the final mini presentation concludes. Okay. Just to say that now we are into the month of September, and the world, certainly Europe, is starting up again, that we're very much looking forward to welcoming our delegates, as many of you as we can hope to draw along this year, to Copenhagen, to our 22nd annual GHI conference. This is the first time, the first major aviation event that will be held in 2020. We know it has been a year like no other, and we're very excited about bringing the community back together to network face to face. We love what we're doing now, and obviously video calls and Zoom and Teams and all those other platforms have been essential over the past few months, but there's nothing quite like that human contact and being in the room together. We know that our mission is to make the event COVID safe and give you the reassurance, and we're confident we can do that, but we know there is an appetite out there to come together. There's been so much change this year, you don't need me to tell you that, commercially and also operationally, and some big issues to tackle at the conference around things like SLAs. The topic today, sustainability, is being heavily impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. We've got the opportunities of automation. There is an awful lot to talk about, and I think a real need for the community to connect again. And you can save 20% on your delegate fee right up until the 30th of September. So we recommend that you book this month. We very much look forward to having the pleasure of your company in Copenhagen. It'd be great to see you face to face again, a lot of you. Okay, so moving it back to today's topic, sustainability. Massive topic, has been for a number of years. If anything, I think the COVID-19 crisis has probably put the spotlight on this issue to an even greater extent. I'm sure, like me, you'll have seen news footage of wildlife returning to old habitats. There's been dolphins back in the waterways of Venice. And I think, you know, public opinion very much on change we've seen in our environment, the reduction in emissions, and that have resulted from lockdowns across the world. And there'll be a real pressure, I think, on our industry, on many others, but particularly aviation, to look at how we fast track the adoption of more sustainable practice. I know that here in Europe, a number of governments have specified meeting certain environmental targets alongside bailouts for big airlines. So there has been subject to achieving reductions in carbon emissions. That may well become a trend in the future. I'd be interested to get our panel's view. I'm now going to introduce our panel and then hand them over to our first session. We're delighted to have today Neil Pritchard, who is Head of Ops Transformation and Ground Handling at Heathrow Airport. So welcome to Neil. We also are joined by Yanni Alasma, who is Vice President at Finavia. Welcome to Yanni. We have Lars Barso, who is VP of Sales and Marketing at Vestergaard Company. Welcome, Lars. And we have Jelma Mellison, who is Business Development Manager at Viggo. So welcome to Jelma and all of our panelists. And I'm going to hand over to Neil, who's going to deliver the first presentation, and we will then roll on with the many presentations. So I'm going to hand control over to you, Neil.
Hey, thanks, Max. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present about sustainability in aviation.
We'll just get your slides queued up, Neil, but delighted to have you. And Neil, you joined from the operations team, the perspective at London Heathrow Airport. So we're giving a sort of airport's view on this topic and how you achieve, particularly interested to hear from you on this issue of driving cooperation and collaboration between a large number of stakeholders, which you obviously have there at Heathrow.
Yeah, absolutely. This is absolutely key for us in this area. Are these queued up now?
You just make it a slide presentation.
Click on slideshow, we can see the screen and we'll get underway.
Okay, I can't view that on my screen.
I'm not sure if we can take control of the team. Bear with us, ladies and gentlemen.
So just as we're working through getting these slides fully up on the screen, first of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about sustainability in aviation. And as you can see here, as part of my introduction slide, Heathrow does have a plan called Heathrow 2.0, which talks about the whole, encompasses a whole remit of our sustainability and our sustainability growth plans for Heathrow, whether it's environmental, whether it's noise, whether it's financial sustainability, which is so important today, or here what I'm going to talk about is Heathrow ULEZ in terms of environmental and emissions in terms of an ultra low emission zone at Heathrow. So first of all, what is an airside ULEZ? So for an airside ULEZ is an ultra low emission zone. For us at Heathrow, we set to enforce an ultra low emission zone at Heathrow by 2025. For us, this means that any vehicle, GSE, drivable plant operating at Heathrow will have to meet the latest emission standards set by the EU government. And in context, for us at Heathrow, that means there's currently 5,000 permanently registered vehicles that need to meet these standards, with up to 20,000 different vehicles that enter the airside environment every single year. Such a massive task, such a massive engagement that we need to work with our partners on in the current environment. With regards to ULEZ, it doesn't actually call for the full removal of fossil fuels, but instead calls for engines to be minimum standard of Euro 6, instead of stage 4 for diesel and Euro 4 for petrol. Alternative zero or low emissions technologies such as electric powered or plug-in hybrids. The ultra low emission zone will operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at Heathrow. Access to the airside environment, like most airports, is strictly controlled via licenses and passes. And for us, we issue vehicle apron passes. And in order to obtain a vehicle apron pass, each vehicle needs to meet those strict standards with regards to age limitations, digital adoption, and telematics. In terms of applying for a vehicle apron pass, every vehicle needs to apply, and the cost of an apron pass is dependent. The cost of a pass is dependent upon the tier in which the vehicle emissions sit. So currently the cost for a vehicle pass for an electric vehicle is free at Heathrow, but for the more polluting vehicles, it could be onwards of £50 per vehicle to obtain a pass. So for us, and that's a cost recoverable charge, just in order for us to maintain those standards. Obviously, as these standards change and more people become compliant with these age limitations and the emission standards, these vehicle apron prices will be reviewed. For us at Heathrow, we even looking at our own fleet, it's such diversity in what we do. We've got 439 of our own vehicles, 60% of which are owned, 40% are leased. And they range, like most airports, everything from a precinct sweeper to a light vehicle to light vans, through to specialised vehicles of de-icing trucks, GLYCOL recovery trucks, rubber removal, as well as the fire service vehicles that we do have. And we've been working towards ULEZ and having a target of emissions since 2014, at the end of 2014, when we first published that we were aiming to have a ultra low emission zone. And part of that drive for us was that our vehicle age limits suggest no vehicle shall enter the airport for the first time that's under 5 years old, and general vehicles should not be more than 10 years old when it's at the airport. There are some exceptions to that for very specialised pieces of kit, which can go up to 15 years. So generally, the 10-year lead into ULEZ was going to give all of our providers, all our service providers and partners the opportunity to rethink their fleet strategies. So when we got towards 2025, their replacement strategies enabled them to be ULEZ compliant in advance, rather than waiting for the last minute for big investment decisions. From a Heathrow perspective, out of the 439 vehicles, 164 are planned to be switched to electric or hybrid by the end of 2020. These are supported by 108 electric vehicle points and 20 advanced charging units as well. To us, this still leaves a big challenge of 275 vehicles that currently are not ULEZ, not currently electric vehicles or fully ULEZ compliant. Of that 275 vehicles, a predominance of those are our specialised kits, such as HGVs, snow equipment, fire vehicles. But like in the industry, we've been having long discussions with a lot of our partners and suppliers, such as Vestergaard, about how we can introduce the likes of cleaner vehicles and electric vehicles into our fleet of airports. And we do, as an airport, really recognise the development costs that it has for our supply chain in manufacturing these vehicles and in developing these in the first instance. As well, from the vehicles that are not owned by Heathrow, how much it costs for our stakeholders and partners and service providers and ground handlers to actually purchase these equipment as well. So 275 vehicles is our remaining challenge. Good news for us, 178 of those do comply with the actual ULEZ standard. So they do meet the Euro 6 for diesel or the Euro 4 for petrol standards already. So really the big challenge for us out of our 440 vehicles is trying to find that solution for that remaining 100 vehicles. So what infrastructure is going to be required? As vehicles and drivable plant can still be petrol and diesel to comply with ULEZ, there's no immediate requirement for additional infrastructure for this to happen from a compliance point of view. However, as we know through this process, community engagement informs our current strategy. Understanding what our stakeholders and our airport users want to do, when they need to use it, and what infrastructure they're going to need is going to really help inform the Heathrow strategy. Likewise, we'll inform our investment plans in terms of provisions of additional fuel or additional electrification points. And again, this is both costly for the service partners and for ourselves as an airport. The preference for ourselves is for vehicles and drivable plant to have electric or alternative zero emission systems. And we recognise that currently the UK government are setting a 2040 target for no fossil fuel vehicles as well. So we're already conscious of what this means longer term. On top of this, the biggest challenge is ensuring that all Heathrow's fleet under 7.5 tonnes will be electric by 2025, as well as ULEZ compliant. We've been doing quite a lot of feasibility study in this area for our whole community, looking at how the effects of GSE pooling and ground pooling could play a part in lowering the need for electrical infrastructure or optimising the resources and equipment we have available, how we work with the 8 ground handlers that we have today to make sure we optimise that pooled fleet, how we optimise that electrical infrastructure, for the community use. We've been working with our community and our stakeholders to understand those fleet replacement plans, undertaking ground handling pooling studies to inform what our electrical infrastructure requirements will be. And we'll continue to support the community with electric GSE trials, and we've done that with a number of organisations. Great success with British Airways, with Donata and Menzies on some of their GSE pooling that we've done to date. And we continue to install electric charging units to support the ground handlers and service providers where they are adopting it for either trial or permanent use. So for us, what are going to be the challenges for us as we move towards 2025? 5 years ago, when ULEZ was 10 years away, it seemed a really long time, and now 5 years on the horizon, it seems to be coming at a more rapid pace. I think personnel and airside operators are changing very, very quickly, and we need to maintain regular communication as the whole network of suppliers, service providers and personnel changes at the Heathrow environment. The physical equipment, the electric vehicles and GSE is rapidly evolving, and installing infrastructure to support the trials is a really complex process requiring funding approval, power availability, underground surveys and construction lead time. Heathrow is not a greenfield site like many of the airports, so it's not simply the case of finding the electric charging unit, putting it above the ground and plugging into it. Frequently the supply, the general supply of power is going to be a challenge. So some of the outlooks, it's going to be tens and tens and tens of millions of pounds just to supply sufficient electrical infrastructure, just to power the sufficient units to deliver this. Lifetime costs are really challenging. Most electric GSE is currently more expensive than fossil fuel equivalent. Sometimes you can pay double the cost for an electric vehicle that you would for the fossil fuel equipment. However, the running costs remained in favour, with electric being cheaper rather than diesel. So actually making sure that funding is available when we are looking at that replacement cost, and looking at the current times with liquidity of all the businesses, selection of choosing a vehicle that is 50% of the cost of another for practically the same vehicle is going to be a tough thing to do. And trying to identify what the best fit solution for each of the providers and service providers is in this rapidly evolving market. How do we deliver the right electrical infrastructure? Is it battery farms? Is it hydrogen fuel cells? At the moment, it's like jumping back 20 years to decide, do we want a VHS or a Betamax video, or to coin 10 years ago, do we want DVD, or are we just going to obtain it online? There's so many different ways that this can be achieved, and we're going to be rapidly evolving over the next few years. Purely because of these market conditions, with ground handlers changing the airlines that they service every 2 to 3 years, it makes it really hard to work with ground handlers and for them to lock in contracts about the volumes of equipment they will need. So contracts for those guys are only 2 to 3 years long, and can be terminated within a couple of 3 months notice. So signing these guys up to long-term contracts on more expensive electrical vehicles, we really do appreciate the challenges that are there for our partners who do operate at the airport. And monitoring it and enacting the ongoing changes to policy, whether it's the Paris Accord, for us, the Brexit impacts, and subsequent changes to targets are all going to be mindful of what we do and how we achieve it here at Heathrow. I think I've already touched on it in terms of the impacts of COVID-19. There's not one person around that's currently in the aviation market that has not escaped the impacts of COVID-19. With many airports operating less than 20%, 10%, some even 0% of their normal capacity, they're really struggling to generate the incomes to keep them as a liquid, viable business. So for them to try and generate the right revenues to keep them afloat, let alone get replacement vehicles, let alone those vehicles that are potentially more expensive, is a really, really challenging market. So it's continue to watch this space. Data is a big thing for us in how we are going to achieve ULEZ. So in order to obtain vehicle apron passes, people do have to apply. Until last year, whilst we did have an electronic database of all vehicles, we had no way of accurately generating where we were in terms of compliance for ULEZ, not just for ourselves, but also the whole market in terms of all the supply chain and every single one of those 5,000 vehicles that needs to have a vehicle apron pass. Likewise, we had no awareness of, apart from renewing a vehicle's apron pass every single year, we had no direct data on when we was expecting the vehicles to be replaced according to our age restrictions. And just as a brief overview, this is what these three graphs have started to tell us as we got into that data over the beginning part of this year. So the top left graph tells us what category each of the vehicles are in. It also tells us with that middle graph at the bottom in the middle, what is the age and frequency of what time is those vehicles going to be replaced. And that big spike in the middle of that graph illustrates that a lot of vehicles on the airport will need replacing by the time it gets to 23 and 24. So sufficiently, according to the current plans, just in time for compliance. Mm-hmm. On the right hand side, we've got some clock graphs which show us over the time in the columns of 2025, 26, 27, when we expect vehicles to be currently compliant against those ULEZ standards. And on the base data that we've got today, you can see there it could take towards 2031 if operators don't advance their program before all vehicles are replaced and fleet is replaced. So we are going to continue with that engagement with our partners to make sure we can drive towards a ULEZ compliant airport. Technology has become increasingly important to us in understanding what we do and how we do that. So using our telematics provider and some of the integration services of our own telematics data and that of some of our third parties, not only can we start to drive improvements in our vehicle standards, we can start to drive some of the process changes as well. So we can start to see, for example, not only where vehicles are, how they've been driving, but start to really analyze where vehicles are switched on and idling, but not running or driving anywhere. So potentially burning unnecessary emissions. So how many wasted times? We can also look at our own fleet and vehicle databases to work out, actually, have we got too many vehicles? Have we got vehicles that are sat around doing nothing? So is it a dead asset? And there's one of the graphs there in the middle on the right-hand side that's detailed sustainability measure. By updating all the background detail to every one of those 5,000 vehicles, it gives us the opportunity to work out from the telematic data when one of those vehicles is running, when it's operating, understanding the engine size and emissions type of engine it is. We can work out per the 15-minute time slot how much CO2 emissions are being created by those vehicles that are driving around the airport any one time. So we can start to get a real data analytics of how much CO2 are we really starting to use at the airport from real life data that we've got within the system. And as we start to switch more and more from our old fossil fuel vehicles to those that are either hybrid, lower emissions, through to those that are electric, we can hopefully really start to see that reduction and that physical impact, that benefit that we're trying to really achieve as we start to drive towards a ultra low emission zone at Heathrow. And just as a sign out for me in terms of the summary, in terms of how we're going to achieve the ULEZ. So data from an internal perspective is going to be key and has been key for us. Gathering the data from telematics, looking at the detail within our vehicle apron pass ID gateway systems, and drawing upon all those other data and dash cam technologies to provide as much data as we can. Using that data, turning it into real information to understand what the uses are. Making a reduction, first of all, making a big reduction on the journeys we're making, seeing how we can turn that information, making sure vehicles aren't idling, making sure that we can incorporate some of that data into some of our strategies to drive down the reduction in the use of those vehicles. From an external perspective, engage. Make sure we speak to our stakeholders, make sure we speak to our service partners, make sure we continue to speak to our suppliers to really understand their current status, really keep on top of discussions with them about their strategies for replacing fleet vehicles, making sure that they are going to be replacing like-for-like vehicles with those greener equivalents, and understanding how we as an airport authority can help them achieve that, understanding what infrastructure we will need to support them with and what budget requirement and restrictions there are. Continue to look at the broader data strategy, seeing where that makes a difference. at Heathrow, we also look at a volume of joint forums. So we've been working with external forums such as this. We also have our own clean vehicle partnership and center of excellence, where we're pulling in the lead people accountable in each of our organisation to get senior sponsorship to explore joint initiatives and joint funding for implementation of efficient decisions at Heathrow as well. So that's our key summary on achieving ULEZ at Heathrow. So I hope you found that useful as one of the ways in which we're driving sustainability in aviation.
Thank you, Neil. Some interesting stuff in there. And please, I see there's one question come in. And if you have any further questions for Neil, then please drop them in the Q&A section, sorry, at the bottom of your screen with the 2 speech bubbles. Just leave them in there. And likewise for the subsequent presentations, I'm going to hand quickly over to Yanni Elasma, VP at Finavia. And Yanni, we will cue your slides up and hand the screen over to you and hear the next presentation. Here we go. Got your slides. Yanni, you just let us know you're there. I seem to have lost audio on you.
No, it should be fine. Sorry.
Ah, he's there. I was beginning to sweat there. You're there. Good man. We're over to you then.
But again, put them in slide mode, please.
Yep. Am I able to do it here?
Sean will fix that one for you.
Seems to be, I'm not able to click it on the slide mode. So
no,
there's,
Alice, you have to help us.
Yeah.
If you just click through, you've got control of the screen, Yanni. So if you just click through the slides, you should be fine.
Yeah, but right now you're not in slide mode, Alice.
Whoever's house control, just click slideshow and sort that out.
There you go.
There we go.
There we go. Thank you. I will just request the control. So here we go. Thank you. First off, thanks for the opportunity to speak on the webinar. It was actually nice to brainstorm with myself on the topic instead of the COVID-19 topics that I believe is filling our days at the moment across industry. So it was nice to think about the sustainability items, which are of course important and pretty important part of the ramp up, as well as the industry hopefully soon will start to pick up. There we go. I will just find the correct button here. Just wanted to introduce some of the items or the topics that Helsinki Airport has already done. So we are actually officially carbon neutral at the moment. And there's 5 initiatives that has helped the airport to get there. Just to name a few, we changed all the lighting to LED systems. So basically this pretty much covers the terminal, office facilities, but also the apron. So the taxiway lights and the runway lights, and the of course the general lighting at the airports. So that was a big success. Another big initiative we ran a couple of years ago already was to have apron buses run on the waste-based diesel, which is actually made 100% from the waste, and it's a domestic product. So that was a big step forward. Other initiatives include the solar plant on the rooftop. It's generating power for the terminal, one of the biggest solar plants installed in the building in Finland. And of course, we do have some wind and power emissions compensated, as of course, the airline or airport and ground handling business cannot be 100% carbon neutral. So during 2016, Helsinki Airport emissions were actually offset by emission reductions units from wind and power biogas projects in India. And what was the presentation all about today was the engaging or helping other stakeholders to get there. And us being officially carbon neutral, we have the responsibility to be aware of the how the other stakeholders at the airport are acting in relation to the reducing the emissions, and in a collaborative way to help those companies and stakeholders to get there. Oh, we went 1 to 4. Let's roll back. I just try to brainstorm how the airport can help the stakeholders, such as ground handling companies and other companies, catering, cleaning, maintenance, go there. So of course, enabling the environmental initiatives. So we should be clear on the communications and the goal setting, and creating environment with the proper aspirations, how we want to drive the desired change. And directly linked to that one is to research together, find the so-called low-hanging fruits, and maybe not so low-hanging fruits, where the emissions could be cut, and of course establish ambitious but realistic plans for the short and long-term initiatives. Planning the infrastructure is of course usually or typically is driven by airport, but we shouldn't forget the stakeholders. So at least here in Helsinki Airport, we try to listen with a close ear about the requirements and desires and wishes, where the stakeholders are going, and what kind of equipments they are going to have in the near future. Some of the examples on that one would be the, of course, the charging stations and the biofuel access, to name few. And of course, it's important to track the impact. So, like all major companies, Finavia is also publishing the yearly or annual environmental report. So we could actually try to de-shipper some of the figures that are related to the action points we've done with the stakeholders over the years. So in a way, like closing the year and see what the actual impact on the environmental things was. GSE manufacturers in general, the collaboration is a must. Few of the my favorite topics listed here, not necessarily in order of importance, but the total cost of ownership in the goes with environmental aspect, of course, because the durable products with the low total or absolute cost of ownership and long operational life will reduce the maintenance cost and spare parts need, and therefore need for the raw materials or what we need to produce the spare parts. The powertrains, I can build on what also Neil said on the challenges. So about the analogy to DVDs and onlines and Betamaxes and VHSs. I think we are not standardized yet on that sense, but I believe we can agree that the fuel or the fossil fuel is the one of the biggest expenses also in the ground handling business, and of course therefore big source of emissions. So it's a very interesting topic to see where we are going actually with the powertrain selections, whether it's electric or something else. And one of the things I've come across is the recyclable materials. So when we outphase assets, would there be like opportunities still left to be discovered? So just to make sure that from the remains of the outphase asset, we can use it as a new component or raw material for the new unit. Not all about the assets or the GSCs. I think the processes make difference too in when we are trying to chase emission reductions. From the airport's perspective, the apron planning, so the dynamic apron planning, takes consideration of needs of all stakeholders and will reduce the driving in the aprons. That's of course important. I'm not even going to the procedures in the air, like continuous descents and etc. So focusing on the ground here. And standardized procedures. So we as an airport, we need to support the stakeholders operating in the apron to have their procedures standardized, so we can reduce the emissions significantly, less driving and especially idling, and of course less occupancy at the stands. And I already mentioned on the previous slide, so the enabling by the infrastructure, so pragmatic planning of the charging areas with the stakeholders, easy billing, reliable equipment, and not GSE related, but of course the disposal of the hazardous materials and waste from the workshops. And of course, what I think is important is that when accidents do happen, so we as an airport should have the clear procedures in case of environmental accidents, oil spills, glycol, fuel, you name it. So we need to be prepared to handle those as well. I try to draft a short SWOT diagram here. I believe the strengths would be we have a strong will to go green. The general climate at the moment is very supportive. And as we can know, even the small emission reductions in the aviation quantifies as a big or major reductions in a big picture. So the 0.something% translate to actually huge savings. Threats, I think the threat would be that the change will be too slow. Maybe we will become stagnant for other reasons too, just to name the corona at the moment. So the resources and the funding could be a little bit stagnant on this one. Battery technology, speaking of harsh climates, Nordic climates, compatibility problems with the biofuels, with the older engines and tire types. Geographical differences, raw material prices, especially when speaking on the battery technologies. Weaknesses side, maybe common agenda. This is just my thinking out loud. Do we have a proper, clear common agenda as a aviation community? What we want to try to achieve? I believe we do have, but I should be more clearer. Standardization. And of course, the weakness at the moment, given the situation, is for the companies is the top and bottom line problem. So there's no or little revenue and hence the profit. So the investing to the new technology may be hard in the near future as we go. And the opportunity side, I think the innovation leaders or the innovation leading companies are looking closely to solve the airport industry environmental problems at the moment. And there should be like a silver lining on every crisis. So I think at least the corona crisis, we can now come up with the new solutions, environmental actions, and even I think the environmental aspects could be part of the airports and ground handling companies' ramp-up plan, and should be also communicated as such. That was my pitch. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Yanni. Thank you for that. And I'm interested to get your audience questions for Yanni to answer a little bit later, but I'm now going to hand over to Lars Barso for a manufacturer's perspective on some of these challenges.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you all for participating, since I guess it's a little bit of our seminar here. Thank you very much for all participating. And thanks to the three other panelists for being part of this. Alice is going to be my controller here for the presentation. We at Vestergaard are also seeing a huge impact of this COVID-19, and part of what we are looking as a positive, if we need to see light at the end of the tunnel, is to go sustainability. So we're focusing basically all of our efforts on sustainability and the green agenda. We see, if you look at this, what we call completing the cycle. We spray, but then we're able to recover, to recycle, transport it back to where we need it, in-truck manufacture if we want, and then we can spray it again. So basically the idea of spraying on Monday, picking it up, recycling, and spraying it again on Friday. So we are trying to tap into some of this idea that both Neil and Yanni so far have talked about. How can we as a supplier be part of that? So if we go to my next slide, Alice, then Vestergaard has actually set up what we feel are rather ambitious goals in our own corporate social responsibility. We want to go zero incident by 2030. And zero incident really means everything from small accidents. People should not be injured while at work in an airport. We should have no trucks, vehicles running into each other. We should have no trucks running into aircraft. We should have no aircraft having incidents. And that also goes then in some of the technology that we still at this point do not even know, ice detection or contamination detection. Once we have that, we can go automation, robotic. Then we think we are in a total different way than the type of operation we're doing today. And then the other angle of our CSR is it's carbon neutral ground handling by 2030. So that's just over 9 years away that we want to be totally fossil free. We already have several initiatives going right now that are part of this, but from now on until 2030, we aim to go all the way on that. Some of the first parts that we have done, Alice, please switch again, is to take our big beta de-icer and turn it into, at this point, a hybrid electric de-icer. It started out just being called hybrid because it is basically a Volvo that has a generator, then it has a battery. But for particularly the Chinese market, they want electric only. So now it's an electric de-icer with a range extender. And the range extender at this point happens to be a Volvo engine. But with this, you can actually drive around the aircraft. You can de-ice up to 10, 15 aircraft. So I'm actually tapping into this, no idling, no equipment standing around emitting on the apron or in the airport as such. If you go one more slide, Alice. We have developed our own electrical chassis for water and live trucks, and later this will become for all kinds of service vehicles. So again, tapping into some of what you said, Neil, all vehicles under 7.5 tons should be this. We're actually aiming to build our own 16-ton chassis, all electric, so that we actually take away a lot of the fossil equipment that's out there today and make it electric. Yeah, just one more, please. And here's a new GLYCOL recovery vehicle. This is still, at this point, a diesel-driven equipment because it has actually a 12-ton hopper in there, so it takes a little while before we can go electric. But we actually aim to do this electric as well. So this is part of the cycle that we showed, that we can spray one day and recover it and put it into a recycling plant. One of our big customers in the US has just bought a few of these because there is now a big project in Cleveland where they actually recover everything and have put in a recycling plant right there. So we see that this is a big part of the sustainability as well, to take away anything that is harmful to the environment, that leaves a carbon footprint. And just one last slide, and then I'm almost done. We can actually do what we call in-truck manufacturing. That's again by taking this recycled glycol, or it could be raw glycol from the start, and actually make it into aircraft de-icing fluid right in the truck itself. That would again save us from trucking it all over the country or countries. So we're again looking at, are there any technologies, ways where we can save CO2, save the environment, and make it smarter for the operators. So the big thing here is, I don't know if it was Yanni or Neil who said that typically they are twice as expensive, the electric equipment. We actually look at it that it is slightly more expensive. The equipment that we're putting out is only slightly more expensive to purchase, but it's a lot cheaper to operate, and the maintenance is a lot less on this equipment. There are actually fewer moving parts. The electro drives are a part, equipment that's been around for ages, so it's a lot easier and a lot simpler to maintain. I heard somewhere around in the US they're talking about that the automobile repair shops, they're actually laying off people because people drive more and more electric cars. There's nothing there to do. So we see this whole sustainability agenda it used to be licensed to grow. Now I guess we call it licensed to operate. So when we hopefully get back in some kind of shape after this crisis, we are there to help with green initiatives to overcome this. So that's basically what I had.
Thank you very much, Lars. Interesting stuff. If you have any questions for Lars, just drop them into the Q&A section and we'll get to those after our concluding presentation, which I will hand over now to Jelmer to deliver. Over to you, Jelmer.
Thank you very much, Max, for this introduction and the ability to speak here. And thank you very much to all the 165 participants who joined this webinar. Honored to speak to you. So I've been asked a few questions by the GHI, and I'll keep it brief because I think the other speakers put in quite some time already. So when we're looking at Viggo's the ground handler in the Netherlands, and we've noted down a GSE mission statement. We noted it down in 2018, so that was all pre-COVID, and we said we want to be the private handler with the most safe, ergonomic, sustainable GSE fleet for Western Europe within the limits of our financial possibilities. And we were well on our way, especially on the green part, to electrify pretty much almost our entire fleet, everything which was technically available. We've been one of the early adopters of a lot of very innovative kit. And basically, if there is an alternative diesel, which is electric, we always go electric. And now, well, one of the questions the GSI asked me is indeed, will COVID-19 usher in a greener age? Because we see here, this is it's a Dutch politician who said, oh, aviation has to become green. You see the airlines, they got green initiatives. There's a lot of...
Jelmer, sorry to interrupt you. We're just having a little problem with the audio on here. Do you want to try without... Can you try unplugging the earphone? We're just sort of getting a bit of it's cutting out.
Mm-hmm. Is this by any chance better?
That's better for me. Is everyone else? Yeah, is everyone else getting that better?
No, I do not.
Yeah.
Much better.
That's much better, Jelmer. Yeah, if you're okay doing it that way, we can get a much better quality of audio.
So, panelists, okay, right now I cannot hear you, Max. So
yes, we're much better that way, Jelmer.
Much better now. All right. Well, if everybody can hear me, I cannot hear Max. So, Max, if you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me, I'll just keep speaking. Then, all right. Never mind. Sorry for the mumble. Do you want me to go back, Max? Or
yeah. Just if you wouldn't mind, Jelmer.
Well, I cannot hear you. So you want me to go back as a thumbs up and stay. All right. Sorry. So Viggo is the ground handler, as a ground handler in the Netherlands, and we have noted down our mission statement, GSE mission statement in 2018. And we stated we want to be the private handler with the most safe, ergonomic and most sustainable GSE fleet of Western Europe within the limits of our financial possibilities by 2022. So that is a lot more ambitious than 2030 or being zero emission, what Lars said in 29, or the what our Dutch government stated, aviation has to be zero emission by 2050. We are a lot more ambitious, and we've really adopted a lot of innovative kit in our GSE, and we're also looking at other things. So, for example, our company is completely paperless, is basically not allowed to print anything anymore. and that has also reduced our footprint, obviously. So one of the questions that the GHI asked me is, will COVID-19 usher in a greener age? And well, on the one hand, yes, because for example, in the Netherlands, our Dutch government will only support KLM, the national carrier, in case they also achieve some sustainability goals. Then again, on the other end, oh yeah, this was positive. To answer first, because indeed COVID-19 did what politicians, lobbyists, technology, and the whole sector could not achieve. Because it was my goal, personal goal, to reduce emissions by 90% in 2025. But actually COVID made it happen. So I told my CEO, look, my goal is done. Where's the bonus? But yeah, he wasn't too happy about that. But the if we go a bit more serious, on that note, will it usher in a greener age? Well, unfortunately, we need volume and perspective, because all of our business cases were run on a certain volume. For example, Eindhoven Airport is the main airport we're operating. All of our business cases assume 6 million passengers, 7 million passengers, maybe even a bit more. But now with COVID, we got a lot less passengers. So all of our business cases basically went belly up. Also, we need perspective. For example, if we want to invest in innovative kit, and if we go to the bank and get something in the lease, they're looking, you're working in aviation. All you have to do is flick on the news and basically you see that aviation is not the market to work in. So can, on the one hand, COVID-19 introduce a more greener age? I believe so, we can. But then again, at the same time, someone needs to be able to pick up the bill. And if I can speak for, well, some of the ground handlers, or at least for ourselves, with our reduced volume, it will be very difficult to pick up that bill, because I think what both Lars and Niels stated is that the investment costs are maybe a bit higher. The maintenance costs are a lot lower. Yes, I can confirm, but at the same time, you do need volume, because if you don't have volume, then the difference between the investment cost and the maintenance cost is very unfortunate. Because otherwise, well, basically, if no one picks up the bill, we'll just stick to diesel instead. There was also a question by a GHI, how can we make sure that the airport infra is not the limit in greenifying? What we have done in Viggo, and I think we're very successful in that, we always team up with the local airport authorities. So when we don't just ask for a plug and say, okay, we need a plug in the wall to charge, for example, an electrical GPU. What we do is we ask them in advance. So say in 2 years' time, we will require a certain amount of infrastructure in that particular area. And in 1 year's time, we will need to have a certain amount in that area. And also we're trying to explain to the airport authorities what are the long-term benefits, because for the airport, they invest in infrastructure and they have a much longer term than ground handlers. I mean, for us as ground handlers, we might have a 2-year contract, 3-year contract, 4, sometimes 5. But basically, we usually have there is a limit to our existence. Whereas if you are the airport owner, the infrastructure is yours and it might have a 10, 15, 20 years horizon. So we're trying to explain to them that their investment has a far longer horizon than the ground handlers. Also, we're looking at trying to explain to them it's not just beneficial for the ground handler, it's also beneficial for the airport. And for example, if we electrify, it's not just about the emissions, it's also about noise reduction, so which is by far more comfortable for staff, and it brings in a safety issue, because electrical equipment usually brings a lot less noise compared to, for example, a ground power unit or whatever it does. So if there is less noise on the apron, then it's actually a safer working environment, because, well, basically noise is always a risk. So we don't just focus on the emission part. We're also looking at other parts, why it's good for the airport to invest. And another question from the GHI team was, what are your latest developments, or what can you look at now? I don't know if other grandeurs or airports know, but for example, the stairs we use on an narrow body, it is nowadays possible to have them run on solar power 365, no problem. Maybe not, Jani, in your part. I mean, I can imagine in some part of Finland it might be difficult to run something on solar technology in certain months of the year. But when I speak of the Netherlands and all the countries alike, it is definitely possible, because at Viggo, at Eindhoven Airport, you can see we have all of our stands have been fitted with electrical equipment on solar power, and they run fully self-sustainable. So don't be afraid to invest in that technology. At the same time, you never have to charge them anymore. You don't have to fill them up with diesel. So it also reduces your workload, and which means there is less movements on the ramp, which is safer. Another development, I know the biofuel, you can now put in biofuel in pretty much all of your engines, and they don't need to adapt in any part. It is completely safe. It won't destroy your engine by far. The only thing is, it's still 30% more expensive. So there we go back to the issue, who picks up the bill? Because of, well, not because of COVID-19, I think a very nice, interesting aspect to mention is when we're looking at GSE kit for a handler, we've invested in quite some GSE. When you look at the lifespan of that, for example, I can imagine a Lars, maybe you can say the average lifetime of a water truck or a lavatory truck is years and years and years. I mean, you might replace it after 10 years, but usually you can use it for 15 years, no problem. Right now we have on our apron running around, like, you know, the catering trucks, the water trucks, etc. Then the bodybuilders who make the catering truck, that will last, could even last for 25 years, but we still have old pollutive technology in that machine. So we found a company, they actually can refurb existing trucks, which they were doing it for another market. So then we can see, all right, so how can we, with the biggest bang for our buck, invest in something which can make our fleet a lot greener? Because when you drive, I don't know, a Mercedes Atego, Iveco, Eurocargo, etc., they're not designed to drive on the apron. But basically, that's just what we have to do with. I mean, well, apart from Vestergaard, for example, you make your own chassis now. But a lot of these trucks, they've been designed to do 100 kilometers an hour for 2 hours straight on the motorway. If you go to the really fully electric vans, like which are currently on the market, their range is also complete overkill for what ground handlers need. You have a range of 90 kilometers, whereas how much does a catering truck do in a day? 5 kilometers, maybe 6, not that much. So we found a party, and they can actually just take out the powertrain, the conventional powertrain, and then switch that up with a few battery cells and a small electric engine for maybe just 25,000 euro. So when you're looking at your investments, like your current fleet, which you have in a water truck or a lavatory truck or a catering truck, for maybe just 25,000 euros each, you can take out the existing powertrain, diesel powered, and then refurb that with electric. So what we're doing is, because it will be difficult to invest in completely new trucks. For example, we know DAF is coming with a truck which is fully electric, but you don't want to spend 200,000 euros on the truck and then go to a bodybuilder and then another, I don't know how much to make it a lavatory truck. So this is something Viggo is currently investigating. So due to COVID-19, our Green GSE budget is limited. So now we're just looking at small initiatives which make sure it's kept on the radar, and then hopefully we can still greenify further, just maybe at a slower speed than we were hoping for. And as soon as the business picks up again, then we can look a bit at bigger projects. So that was it. I wanted to keep it brief, and thank you very much for your
very interesting points. Thank you very much. And that concludes our formal presentation. So to all our viewers, if you want to drop any of your questions into the Q&A section at the bottom of your screens, then we'll get our teeth into those. Jelma, I'm going to launch a couple of our poll questions to the audience in a sec, but just picking up on, obviously you're very proactive in this field and doing a lot of work in adopting more sustainable equipment and practice. What's the reaction from airline customers, and how effective is it in winning new business? I mean, is this something your customers are switched on to, and is proving something that will open doors?
I believe so.
Thumbs up if you can hear me, Max. Okay, good. In all honesty, yes, it is nowadays. It's in all tender documents, and you have to greenify, but at the same time, it's not allowed to cost a penny more. So, which is doable. So it is. I think last you also mentioned that it's not an order winner anymore. It's basically an order qualifier. And with the right volume, then it doesn't have to cost more. But unfortunately, that is a requirement. So if you want the world, but if you don't have the volume, then it's usually more expensive. But I think in a couple of years, it won't even be an order qualifier anymore. It will be so default. Zero emission is the new way forward. So what we see in all the tender documents is customers just say it's an order qualifier, and you have to really explain what you're doing and why you're doing it. And it's not just in the electrifying, there's also paperless, for example. So you're looking at your complete ecological footprint.
Lars, you want to make a comment on
no, I was actually saying the same thing. We do see some of the clients that are beginning to say this is the way forward. A country like China, where they have their overall airport authority, CEAC. They fund some of the equipment that's purchased around the airports, and sometimes they fund 30%, 40%, and the smaller airports maybe 50%. But when it's electric, they fund all the way up to 100%. So it's a big incentive for the airports to switch to electric. So there is something there.
I mean, you do see, if you go on the website, you see a lot of airlines that will use their environmental credentials as a marketing tool to their passengers. So it's obviously a big ticket item on their agendas, which is why it's interesting. And I imagine you're saying it's a standard thing, but it's obviously something that the airlines are looking out for when they tender, because it matters to them and their business reputation.
And you mentioned in the beginning, some of these places like Germany, where the government said you have to close down some of your domestic routes in order to get funding. That's going to happen. So we're back to this license to operate rather than license to grow. Just to get back in business, you have to show, well, we're doing it for a lot less CO2.
Which is, and to add to that, it's not just about the emissions as a standard, but it's also about the working environment, because you see a lot of people when they start working on the ramp, they'll work on the ramp for the rest of their lives, which means they could potentially work around certain fumes for 30 years. So we're looking at from the, our corporate social responsibility to our employees, because our employees work there day in, day out. A passenger, unless you're a really frequent flyer, you might interact a bit less. But we don't really know the long-term impact. But so if we do know it's not good for you. So everything which can be done electric, we believe should be done electric.
Question that's just come in from the audience: how safe are these electric-powered GSE equipment during heavy rain with heavy lightning and thunder? Open to the panel, Lars.
Yeah, well, we've tested and have not found anything yet. I also drive an electric car myself. I drive
not
it
struck
in
by lightning
rain.
Yet.
Yeah, and I haven't seen any thing happening yet. I haven't really read about any electric vehicles that had a problem with it. It potentially it maybe could happen, but I've also seen aircraft being hit by lightning, and that's not so good. So honestly, I don't think there is a particular challenge here.
Another question, this one for you, Jelmer, other panelists too. What is the likely disadvantage of electric-powered vehicles and equipment, and what is the operational timeframe or duration of equipment working at a stretch?
The question was, what are the disadvantages?
Disadvantages, of equipment.
Of course, there is a very logical disadvantage. Electrical equipment needs to be charged. The same as any diesel-powered unit has to be refilled, whereas refilling a truck will cost you a minute or two, and charging, depending on the battery type, takes a lot more. Now, what we do is some of the units we have lithium-ion powered batteries, so that's just a matter of hours. And the other one are just the lead acid. So the lead acid are charged overnight. We know exactly when we need to charge them. The lithium ion, we do more occasional charging. To us, that's the only downside, but usually with peaks and valleys in the capacity required, there will be moments where you don't need all of your GSE. So it might take a bit more planning. And you have to be aware and you have to be conscious about it. But other than that, I would say there is always a moment to charge. For the rest, I wouldn't see big negative effects, because especially, for example, on the safety part, why would a battery be less safe than a combustion engine, which is actually fire inside a steel box? So, for example, by law, we have to put a fire extinguisher on all of our diesel-powered units. We don't have to put a fire extinguisher on battery-powered units because they are safer than combustion engines. So the question shouldn't be, aren't those more dangerous? The question might be, why is this not the standard, and are the old ones dangerous?
I think, Hjalmar, the rescue services just need to be aware that if there's going to be like lots more battery technology around the airplane and airport as such, just to be aware that the type of fire and the properties could be a little bit different, but that's of course understood.
Neil, let's make a point.
Yeah, no, just agreeing with Yanni there as well. So one of our biggest considerations when we was purchasing some electric buses as well was about the extent of a fire. So the wattage or the kilowatts that a fire burnt with with an electric bus was quite significant. So it was something our fire and rescue teams did have to get into as well. As a good point, Yanni.
Good stuff. Well, we're charging up the audience interest, because we're getting a flood of questions coming in now, which is great. A couple of these questions relate to charging, so I'll put these to everyone on the panel. Two questions here which ask, how about charging facilities at smaller airports? And would you say it's more difficult, Hjalmar, to get charging facilities, access to them at those smaller airports? Interested to your views.
Our view is, I mean, obviously, if you want to have a certain amount of power in a specific area, you can't get it overnight. So that's why we have the long-term vision, and we're already discussing with the airport what should the grid look like in 2 or 3 years from now. And because we've been doing that for a couple of years, we now have a very good collaboration, and we understand that, all right, next summer we need this and this and that, because 3 years ago we already informed you we need power in those particular areas. Is it more difficult in a small airport than in a big airport? I wouldn't say so. I would say it's the same, because in the end, if it's a big airport, you have potentially bigger investment budget, you might have more specialists involved. If it's a smaller airport, in the end, it's just electricity. It's not rocket science. It's been around for a good 100 years. It's a bunch of coulombs going through a wire, and the wire has to be certain thickness, but it's not super complex. I mean, let's be honest. So I wouldn't say it's more difficult for a small airport. The only thing is you do need a certain volume to do these investments, and smaller airport, depending on where the boundary is. I mean, if you are a 1-2 million passenger airport, any investment is a lot more difficult, obviously. Because you have less passengers to earn that revenue over. But technically wise, no, shouldn't make a difference.
I mean, there's a question from Norman van Uitshorn, I hope I pronounced that right, on a similar theme, but he's saying a big obstacle to go green at airports are the lack of charging infrastructure for electric GSE. Is there an indication that this is improving also at the thousands of smaller airports, or will this take some time to address? How can airports be motivated to invest in a greener future, or will this be left to the ground handlers to invest in? Yanni, Neil, I'll bring you in on that one. So that issue of, you know, how can airports be motivated to invest in going green?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I guess that was the key crux of my presentation, really. So, like I say, a lot of the benefits, it's corporate social responsibility. So the benefits are really not a financial saver predominantly. So yes, there are some financial savings in your monthly outgoings of fuel, etc. But it's about where you need to go, what you want to do, what your corporate social responsibility is. And you know, for us, we want to make a play at Heathrow that we are going to be sort of ULEZ compliant, and as part of that, it's lower emission vehicles, cleaner engines, but certainly electrification as well. So investment in electrification is key, but with that comes the responsibility to understanding what that investment is going to cost. And big airport or small airport, there is a significant demand in having that lead time to know what it's going to be, how you're going to achieve it as well. So as Jelmer said a little while ago, that the challenges are the same. They are economies of scale. It's about engagement with the stakeholder group, and the stakeholder group engaging with the airport just to make sure that we can provide those needs of the customers and of our own in the right manner of time.
Any other additional comments? Yanni, do you want to comment on that one, the airport link there? I think I might have lost your audio. Sorry, Yanni, do you want to try? Oh, we're having a few issues. We'll bring him back in a second. Okay, while we're doing that, I'm just going to launch our first of our poll questions for the audience to answer. If my team, GHI, can load that up, look at that, that's efficiency. So the first question we've got for you is, do you think the COVID-19 crisis will fast track the adoption of more sustainable practice in aviation? Spot the typo, should say in, not is. So do you think that COVID-19 is going to be a catalyst for the adoption of greater sustainability in our industry? Look at that, technology in action. Seeing the results come in. Something that, Jelmer, you touched on this in your presentation because it was one of the questions we gave you. Showing on my screen, you've got a majority saying yes, they think it will. I guess the funding issue is a big thing here amongst those, I guess, the 30% who are saying they think it won't. But interestingly, up to about 65% say they do think that COVID-19 and the pandemic are going to accelerate the adoption of more sustainable practice in our industry. Excellent stuff. Okay, we'll close that. Let's go on to we've got 3 poll questions. Let's rattle through them and see if we can go on to our next one, which is, what is the biggest barrier to you adopting more environmentally friendly, sustainable equipment or best or practice? So if we load that one up, question 2 is, what is the biggest barrier to you as an operator adopting more environmentally friendly equipment or practice? The options we've got are a lack of investment capital or a clear return on investment from doing so, lack of knowledge, lack of know-how in your business. It's just not a priority for our customers. So why would we? Or is it a lack of infrastructure at your airport, at the airport where you are operating, or multiple airports where you operate? I'll leave people to vote on that one. We will share the results with you post-webinar once we close them off, but just always interested to get an audience take on some of these challenges. And we are planning a sustainability panel in Copenhagen where we will we'll touch on some of these issues further in more depth. Excellent. Okay, so we've frozen that one. And finally, I mentioned it in my introduction, but do we think government financial aid for our sector should be tied in with meeting environmental targets? So should there be specifications on reducing emissions, adopting electric equipment, whatever that may be, but should bailouts and financial aid for aviation operators be subject to the sustainability issues? Interesting, an overwhelming 90-odd% saying yes at the moment. So the will is there, look at that, 92%. Interesting. Yeah, a huge majority saying yes, it should. Okay, excellent. Interest. Thank you, ladies and gents, for your votes. we'll share some of the findings, all those findings at the end of the session. You probably didn't catch all the results because it's flashing up very quickly, but any thoughts on some of the voting there and the themes that I think, obviously from the first question, people do think that COVID-19 is going to act as a catalyst here.
I totally concur. I totally think that that's the way it's going to be.
And there's certainly, moving on to the final question, that it's legitimate for any aid that we receive or any government packages for airlines, for handlers, whoever, the airports, that you are beholden to then adopt more sustainable equipment practice as part of that. And then there's certainly an appreciation or an acknowledgement in the industry that that's the way to go. But it all comes down to money, as question 2 seems to indicate, with this ROI and the investment. Here we are again, different topic, but same root cause. So, and
it does come down, if I can say something here, to Neil and Yanni, the 2 airport panelists. It really comes down to enough charging infrastructure and basically also space. And I know, Neil, you're the worst in that sense, or you're the most challenged in that sense, that there's space to actually park up these vehicles next to a charging point. I mean, for those of us who drive electric vehicles in the cities, there are never enough charging points, and there's never enough space to park there. So, I mean, that's going to be a huge challenge in achieving all these goals.
Yeah, agree, Lars. It is one of those significant challenges that we've been an airport for over 70, 80 years now. So for us, having not a greenfield site, it is like trying to do something new on top of something old. So to get the full power provision that you need and to find the right space, I know space constraint is a different challenge at the moment with our sort of lack of aircraft movements, but go back to pre-COVID times, it was hard enough to find the right space to park all of our service equipment at the right time, let alone find that right charger at the right location where somebody hasn't dumped a vehicle sometimes as well. So agree, space constraint, the right location at the right time, whilst all those parts are moving, different handlers, different airlines, moving locations at different times, is a real tough environment.
Does that mean that, you touched on pooling, that pooling of GSE has to be the natural progression here?
I personally think pooling of GSE is that it reduces, first of all, the amount of assets that are about the airfield. It introduces more commonality amongst the fleet. So you get safety, consistency, newness of vehicles, maintenance. You're not driving vehicles all the way around the airport because they are on or within the vicinity of the stand or the apron in which you're using as well. So for me personally, I absolutely believe that GSE pooling is a way forward. That is a conversation with our airlines and our services and ground handling partners as well, Max, as you probably know, because some people lease their equipment, some people own it outright, some people have got contracts over different periods of time on that equipment. So it's making sure you can absolutely align that at the right period of time, so nobody is either advantaged or disadvantaged. And in the main, I think there is a lot more advantages to doing that from both a cost, a sustainability, and a safety perspective of GSE pooling.
Thanks, Neil. Brilliant stuff. Let's get on to, we've got about just over 10 minutes left, and there's a few more questions that have come in, so I will rattle my way through them. Just for interest's sake, do the vehicle batteries have the same lifespan? Do the vehicle batteries have the same lifespan as the vehicles? Or how many times should we expect to replace the batteries during the duration of ownership? And Lars, I'll come to you.
Yeah, to be honest, it's still in the infancy. Lithium-ion batteries still in the infancy, so we can basically look to normal passenger cars to see how long they last. Right now, there is an 8-year warranty on most batteries. So to start with, there's an 8-year warranty. To replace most of these batteries, you're looking at somewhere around maybe 10,000, 12,000 euros. So that really is not a huge cost compared to the clutches and the gearboxes and other things that you probably would have had to replace during these 7 or 8 years. So yes, it doesn't have as long a lifetime as the vehicle itself, but it also does not have a more significant cost than normal powertrains clutches, gearboxes, and so on.
Thank you, Lars. We've had another question here about weather. Well, I think we've covered this one from Craig. Hi, Craig, who asks around thunder and lightning conditions. Should we worry about all electrical GSE around aircraft? Earlier on, we said no. There's no reason that it's any more of a safety concern, we believe, than combustion engines, right?
Right.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Excellent. How is the footprint of electrical power generation compared with the footprint for carbon fuels?
That depends where the power is coming from, indeed.
Yes.
How long's a piece of string? Yeah.
That is. And how do you manufacture the batteries? I mean, this is a viable discussion to take. You know, do the production of lithium-ion batteries create a larger footprint, and do the production of the power you put into the batteries create a footprint? That is definitely a discussion that you have to take with your politicians, I guess, basically. And then if we just jump on Jelmer's comment that it also reduces the emission, the small particle pollution, the emissions and everything on the apron. So at least you get a lot of the benefits, and then you have to push your politicians to make sure that the power they produce in your country is less polluting than the rest.
I know, for example, Max, the Schiphol Group in the Netherlands, which is also the owner of Eindhoven Airport and some other airports, they tended and they have bought 100% green electricity. So they've actually invested in a fund, and we have some windmill park somewhere off the coast of the Netherlands, and that's producing all the power which goes to, well, this contract. So in the end, we know we are charging our GSE with electricity which is created by wind power. Now, I do know in other countries it might come from nuclear technology, but there are also parts in the world which still have coal mine facilities. So then it's not about reducing emissions, it's about moving emissions.
Mm-hmm.
But at least I'd say it's our responsibility as the industry to say, all right, we want to have electricity instead of, say, combustion engines. And then it's indeed what Lars said, up to our politicians to make sure that, well, the state or the nation is creating nice and clean energy sources.
What do we think we want from those politicians, from governments, to drive this agenda? What's the most effective way for our governments to coordinate this and to bring us behind that mission to deliver more sustainable practice?
Well, if you stay just within the EU, there's already here all kinds of goals to reduce emissions. I mean, in Denmark itself, we have to reduce emissions by 70% by 2030. And I think in the EU, it's 45 or 46%. So we can, on a national level, talk about that we actually start reducing emissions somehow. And then, so that's one of the ways we can push our politicians.
You think it's an opt-in, aim for that target, and let's all aspire to hit it, rather than incentivization or taxation or other means to drive this?
Those in the countries where they incentivize it, such as Norway, where they truly incentivize electric cars, they have over 50% electric cars. So there is definitely people will go where the incentives are.
A few more questions. We've got 7 minutes, so I'm going to try and get through these. Thomas Keplinger asks, what do you think the panel, will battery powered instead of diesel driven ground power units be the future for 400 hertz supply at the apron, or will it be static frequency converters?
Maybe I can comment on this, because we are indeed using it. It always depends on I mean, if you have static, you lose the flexibility. So then, and pretty much every airport I always visit, and I've visited quite a few, there is always construction works, because it's like an organ. It's not still. It's always moving from left to right, and then you're tearing down a pier, and then you're building something else. At the same time, if you would say you invest in static power, but an aircraft type changes, then you might have to redo the layout of your platform again. So I think in the end it's going to be a combination. So it's going to be a combination on the static parts where you are 100% sure it's not going to change, or at least you expect to be sure. Whereas on the parts where you want flexibility, I would say a battery-driven GPU is a perfectly fine option.
We've talked a lot about electric, but a couple of questions here ask around hydrogen fuel cells and that technology platform. So Ulrich asks, may fuel cells be a future solution to overcome the chicken and egg problem of a ramp-up electrification without existing charging infrastructure? And a question sort of just asking for your comments really on that possibilities around hydrogen fuel cells.
I certainly believe so. And I think I said in one of your panels before, Max, and I actually said that electric is actually a stepping stone to some kind of energy on demand, where, you know, the fuel cell may be energy on demand. That may be the future. I think there could actually be others as well, but they will probably drive electric vehicles. Right now, so the fuel cell is actually an electric car with a fuel cell. So it just has an electric or an extra power in there. Right now, that technology is available, but it's not very widespread. And there are still all kinds of things about charging stations or filling points, and the amounts of the pressure that it has to be under to carry it around. So there's still lots of challenges within the hydrogen as well. But I think it'll probably be one of the future points.
Because it's, I mean, the technology, the fuel cells have been around for decades. I mean, I think the NASA deployed them in the 70s, 80s. So it's not new, but I guess it's some of the constraints that you mentioned, Lars, that, you know, how you commercialize it and the charging times and everything else. Good stuff. Gentlemen, did you want to comment on hydrogen fuel cells?
We've looked at hydrogen fuel cells because obviously for some of the GSE we're using, electricity is not really the way forward. For example, maintenance towing, you need so much battery power, then you can do, well, 1 or 2 tows and then it has to be recharged again. So that's really just, that's not the way forward. So we do believe what Lars is saying, that right now, sometimes you might have a range extender. So the range extender might even become the dominant one. So you have a fuel cell, hydrogen, and it just drives an electric powertrain, especially for vehicles who need more power or longer duration. For example, the Lars, I don't know how you see this, but your truck might be electric, but if you want to do de-icing and you want to heat fluid, I don't really see how we can do that with a battery for now. So we might need an alternative source of power if you want to be really zero emission. So I do believe it's going to be a stepping stone.
And I agree with you. And the current, sorry, can I say so? Yeah, I agree with you, John. The current version does not have heating of the fluids electric, because right now there's not enough electric power for that. So you either have to have a central heating station that could be done electric, or you have to wait forever, just like charging it. You have to wait for electric heat up. So I agree with you. At this point, we need an alternative, some kind of fuel to do that. It could be biofuel as a starting point.
Indeed.
We're running low on time. Sort of final wrap-up question for me. We've seen from the audience polls, from your own comments, that we think COVID-19 is going to really put the emphasis on our sector adopting more sustainable practice and equipment. So what's your short-term sort of outlook now over the next 6 to 12 months? Jeremy, you mentioned in your presentation that you've obviously seen that reduction in carbon emissions, but we haven't had the volume. So when we start to see the volumes creeping back, which we all hope is going to happen very soon, what's the landscape and how do we see this playing out?
That's I think the biggest question is, and nobody can answer that right now, is what's going to be the perspective. If the perspective is going to be, say, aviation is going to pick up again, it's going to be normal, then we can basically start our investment policy and we have a long-term perspective. But if it is very if it is uncertain that we'll have a big volume, you might have a good summer, but you're going to have a very, what happens next year, what happens next summer, then I think a lot of good initiatives might be put on hold because of financial reasons. The Dutch government, for example, and the EU, I think they are supporting. We can, for example, our company, we can only have government benefit if we also achieve green goals, which I think is good. But in the end, if you don't have enough volume and you don't have a long-term perspective, we will basically, well, see if we can sit it out for a while with the current kit we have, unfortunately.
Thank you. Lars, Gianni, anything you want to add? Some sort of summing up thoughts?
I'm waiting for the other two. It's a great show. It's been a lot of good thoughts. I do believe that this is the way it's going, but of course everybody right now is holding their breath, saying what is happening. So we're talking about post-COVID, a lot of these things. So right now, COVID is unfortunately still with us big time. So we're not quite sure when all these things are going to happen.
Thank you very much. Well, we're out of time. Thank you to our panel today, to Jelmer, to Gianni, to Lars, and to Neil. And also thank you to all of you who've logged in and your excellent questions that you've sent through. We will send round presentations and the recording in due course. And just to let you know, we are back on the 24th of September for our next webinar looking at ramp safety. So please join us for that one. We've got some Q&A questions or some post-webinar questions coming round. So please tell us what you thought of the session and areas that we might improve. Thank you all very much, and look out for more news on Copenhagen, and we look forward to seeing you all at the end of November, start of December. Thank you all very much. Cheers, guys. Take care.
Yes, thank you.